Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, so it isn't just the Vikings that get the missed, or that have missed calls on Thursday nights for face masks, I guess.
Yeah, it seems to be kind of like a new experiment the NFL is trying, working around making sure quarterbacks ruin their necks. Kind of an interesting direction to go in, especially after all they've said about protecting quarterbacks. Don't know what that's about.
If you really broke it down, there were at least 2 flags, maybe 3 they could have thrown on that 2-point conversion.
Yeah. Also it was like a bad decision. It's not a well-run play. Burrow didn't make the right decision. Also, there was probably offensive pass interference, defensive pass interference. There was a lot going on there.
Yeah, it was one big mess, and it was the cherry on the top was the face mask. And it wasn't even the first face mask they missed that drive.
I didn't know there was another one. Holy crap.
Yeah, there was a missed face mask earlier in the drive. So, yeah, it's
excellent. Good work.
It's going well for refs on Thursday night on the final drive of the game. Also, correct call going for 2 there at the end.
Yeah, for a couple of reasons. One, going for 2, the conversion rate, especially if you've got a good offense like Cincinnati's, it's a little bit above 50%. Overtime, by its nature, is 50% because the most important element of overtime is the coin flip. So it's literally 50%. Second, it ends the game sooner, which rocks. So also that.
It seems like this was what was supposed to happen on Monday.
Yeah. And
face mask and Hall.
Yeah, exactly. And it just feels like it was so obvious on Monday that they should have, because the nature of how these offenses were before, because it's okay, you've got Patrick Mahomes on the other side who's got, 20 seconds left or something, to just set up a field goal. So by itself, obviously, if he kicks a field goal, you're going to lose, and this is going to put him in a position where he wants to go for a field goal. But, it just feels like you just didn't have a response ready. And then the second, of course, is that you lose with a touchdown in overtime, and you've got, this superstar offense, and now they've got all the time in the world. It felt like it was a little bit more appropriate there. Here, you hold on to something if Mahomes doesn't finish that drive, and you don't have to worry about him again. So, yeah, and of course he doesn't finish the drive. Different circumstances, because a tie is okay because you go into overtime. But, yeah, I don't know, man. And plus, there's always the increased injury risk. So if it's already 50-50, if 2-point conversion is 50-50, which that was the traditional thinking, that it was 50-50, it is slightly better than that. You still want to avoid overtime because of the increased injury risk.
I had read something online about how the Jamar Chase touchdown that was 70 yards that he didn't score right away. He just kind of waltzed down. Somebody went, I can tell I'm getting old because I would have benched that guy when he came back for doing something that stupid. It's yeah.
You would have benched the guy who was adding his 238th yard? Yeah.
It's man. A buddy was at a concert tonight, and I was like, you are missing a phenomenal, albeit dickish game. Right after that touchdown. It's there's a lot of words that can be used to describe this Bengals Baltimore game. So yeah. Well, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well. There is a game to preview. The Vikings are playing the Jaguars this weekend, so we are bringing on a special guest, and we'll be talking a little bit about the team. We also wanted to go over some of the trade deadline stuff as well, and the mailbag. But before we start, again, thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. If you enjoy the show and would like to help us out financially, there's a couple of different ways you could do that. You can go over to patreon.com/norsecode, and for $3.50 a month, or a little less for the year subscription, you get access to bonus episodes, you get access to the Discord. I just put out another bonus episode on Wednesday. So this is like 2 in like the span of a week. So enjoy that. It's quite funny. There is a story there about how I should have been fired, and I managed to cover my butt quite well. And
I mean, it definitely sounds like, of the 2 people involved in that story, if only one of you were to be fired, it shouldn't have been you. So, well, yeah, you should have been fired, but you should have been fired less than the other guy.
Yeah. In any case, there's a great story of incompetence in academia and how nobody got fired, and in fact, one guy ended up getting promoted. So check that out. That guy's going to Bismarck. He got elected. Check it out, patreon.com/norsecode. You can also go to paypal.me/norsecode as well for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com for any number of wonderful Norse code and Arif items that you can wear to the live show, which is happening December 12th, Union 32 Craft House in Eagan, Minnesota. About 7:30 or so, we'll be doing our live show out there, so check us out. Again, the Union 32 Craft House, we've had shows there before. Loved every time we've done it. We have a great group of people that come in for it, so please show up. And if your username on Twitter is... let's see here. Is D's?
No.
I want to offer you the table that is direct, like in front of us and like to the left. I want to make sure that you are there with your questions for Arif so he can answer them in real time, because he is a fan of the things that you are asking him in the mailbag. Jesus. So check it out. The Union 32 Craft House on Thursday, December 12th in Eagan, Minnesota. Let's start the episode. I'm just being friendly, Arif. I'm trying to invite more people, and I want him to feel welcome, and I'm trying to like reserve a table for him.
No, this is all done to harm me specifically. This is not done in the spirit of hospitality, James. I think we both know that. If something was being done to harm you, this episode would be me deleting his question again. After you spent so much time in the pre-show trying to figure out the Japanese translation. That was a lot surprising amount of work again.
We'll see if the question survives. Keep listening to find out. And with that, let's go to the preview of the Jaguars game. Arif conducted this interview with John Shipley from Sports Illustrated right before the news broke that Trevor Lawrence is not playing in the game. So apologies, the first few minutes are about the idea that Trevor Lawrence is playing. So ignore that for a little bit, but otherwise we'll go to this interview that Arif conducted earlier this week.
All right, I'm here with I don't know, probably the best beat reporter on the Jaguars. I don't know, it's a pretty good beat, honestly, but John's pretty good. I used to be a reporter for the Jaguars on SI. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. I'm covering the Jaguars. I'm doing good otherwise.
Yeah, otherwise. Yeah, fair enough. That's cool, man. So Jaguars kind of I don't know about interesting, maybe is the wrong word, but a team that a lot of people had maybe hoped for, that I think people like you warned people away from, but it's always easy to believe in stuff. It is kind of like a team that's a little bit at the crossroads right now, though.
It's funny, like Shad Khan, the owner, openly said, to reporters before the season began. It was like a big press conference. They just got their new stadium deal announced, and he's talking to reporters. Shad Khan rarely talks, during the season. Really, honestly, unless he's firing or hiring somebody or they're celebrating something, he just, doesn't really talk. And he openly said, he was like, yeah, I expect to be in the playoffs. I expect to be contending every single week. And then, a couple of weeks pass by, training camp starts, and I get a text from somebody inside the organization, and they're like, yeah, Shad came in, and we all thought he was going to take a step back from his playoff comments, but pretty much doubled down on them completely. And then the Jaguars, for some reason, ended up filming his speech to the team and posting it, for the entire world to see. So it was very clear that the Jaguars came into the year thinking they were a playoff team. But the funny thing about the Jaguars is I'm not sure anybody but the Jaguars came into this year like picking them as a playoff team. Like, I very rarely saw people like saying, this Jaguars team is probably going to the playoffs this year.
Phenomenal. So I think the primary question mark then is this quarterback, right? Like, I think that there are elements of the team that are playing far worse than him, probably doing a lot more to contribute to losses. But in terms of like questions, is Trevor Lawrence good? I think is like the primary question. And we've got like heated differences of opinion by verified ball knowers. And so I'm just kind of curious, like, what your take is on that kind of question.
So I think Trevor Lawrence is good. Do I think Trevor Lawrence is great or good enough to carry a team that likes to, for lack of a better term, piss down their leg, pretty frequently? No, he's probably not that guy. And, when he was given that generational label by, Mel Kiper and Todd McShay and big draft media, etc., I think everybody expected him to be a guy who, okay, if you add this guy to the worst team in football, he will by himself turn them into a contending team. And there are so few quarterbacks alive who have ever been like that. And it's not a down thing to say that he's not that kind of quarterback coming out of college, and in year 4, he's still not there. But I'd say I'm not sure there's many metrics out there that'd say he's not good. Like, he had a pretty dreadful first month of the season. He was, that obviously the situation wasn't great, but, just by pretty much every metric, CPOE, EPA per dropback, everything. He was playing, catchable ball percentage. He was playing really rough over the first month, but since then, he's, I believe, number 9 in EPA per play since week 5, number 9 in success rate. He's been a good quarterback on a bad team, but he's not yet good enough to like make a bad team a good team, if that word salad makes sense.
No, I understand that. So why is it that opinions on him are polarized? Is it just because of that generational label? Plus you've got people kind of defending, the level of skill that they think that he has versus the production that he had, especially in the first month. Like, what is it that is creating kind of because like everyone kind of has an opinion on Kirk Cousins and it's generally pretty narrow, right? There's not like a ton of variance, right? But with Trevor Lawrence, it feels like there's a really wide variance on this.
I think a lot of it is, like you said, that generational label. A lot of people came in with different expectations. And like, if you just look at his raw, like, statistical production since he came in the league, it's not, going to blow you away at all. Like, there are legitimately Jaguars fans when they get to the 1 yard line. Jaguars fans like hope they throw it instead of running it just so he can get another passing touchdown, because he just doesn't throw that many. Like he has decent production, but he's never had any other than like the end of his 2022 season. He's never had like a offensive player of the year or all pro level of production. So I think that's part of it. And I also think the other part is, frankly, I don't blame anybody for this, but I'm not sure how many people week to week pay that close attention to the Jaguars. There's no reason to blame them. That they're at their very best in Trevor Lawrence's career. They've been a 9-8 football team that basically took a miracle to even make the playoffs. I think that, people see the turnovers and stuff. People see red zone. He's probably one of the worst quarterbacks in red zone history. I will say that he plenty of lowlights. But it was like a couple weeks ago against the Packers. Perfect example. He has a dreadful fumble within the 5 yard line, and some chucklehead tweets out the play and says, "Are we sure that Mac Jones couldn't operate this offense better?" Me, having watched Mac Jones operate Jaguars offenses in preseason games and even some regular season games and practices, obviously I know that, no, he'd be a complete, disaster. He looks like a tight end at times, body-wise. Like he's not – he's not going to do anything for them back there. And then in that same game, people are saying, would Mac Jones play better? He leads them on 2 scoring drives with Tim Jones, Brenton Strange, Ernest Johnson, and Parker Washington as his top targets. So that was like the perfect Trevor Lawrence game to me. Because, he solely put them in some terrible positions, but he was also the only reason they even had a chance at the game, which to me is like Trevor Lawrence to a T so far in his career.
I mean, that sounds kind of like early career, not that he had a late career, but early career Andrew Luck, where it was like, all right, like you did a great job digging yourself out of the hole that you created.
Yeah. Oh, look who has to face the consequences of their own actions. That's,
right, exactly.
That's Trevor as a quarterback.
Yeah. So like, we're not going to spend too much time breaking him down because we just did talk about him, but I do want like a little bit of like strengths, weaknesses, just in terms of like traits, and then how that kind of maps on to this kind of confusing, blitz heavy, look that Flores likes to deploy.
Yeah. So one of the biggest strengths of Trevor, it's also, again, this is a very Trevor Lawrence thing. One of his biggest strengths is also one of his biggest weaknesses. And I know that sounds like a Michael Scott, like interviewing like for a job type thing, but he has complete trust that he can hit basically any throw, any window. I've seen him throw some crazy tight window throws, but I've also seen him throw those passes to guys like Jamal Agnew and Laquan Treadwell and, what was his name? Dan Arnold. Like he trusts that he can hit every single throw, but sometimes he needs to know that, hey, the dude on the other end of that, he's probably not going to catch this. Like he's not one of those guys. So he can hit basically, I think, any throw like on the field. He's very aggressive. He's willing to test defenses deep. He does a really good job in terms of just his overall timing and process. Like, especially a quick game, he's very efficient there. He was one of the better quick game passers in football last year. Struggled at it at times this year. And I think one of those reasons is because one of his weaknesses is, as the game goes on and, as he's in a rhythm, out of rhythm, whatever, his footwork and overall fundamentals can get pretty wonky. But again, that's because I think that he thinks he can hit any throw from any platform, etc. And this is pertinent to the Vikings. He's not great against the blitz. I did something on it earlier today for my podcast, and he's like 22nd in drop back per EPA against the blitz this year. He has 2 total touchdowns against the blitz this year. As comparison, the league leader, Josh Allen, has 11. So he's just not very productive as a passer against the blitz. And that's kind of been something throughout his career that teams have kind of taken advantage of.
All right. So let's talk about the Dan Arnold's well, I guess he was a tight end, but the receiving options that he has available to him has gotten, I would say, slightly better than when he initially joined, especially with the addition of Brian Thomas. But I mean, other than Brian Thomas, it feels like we're not, especially with Christian Kirk on IR, that we're not like playing with the full deck here. Can you like break down this receiver group?
Austin Trammell played 61% of their snaps last week.
Oh, that's cool. I'm going to Google to find out who that is.
Exactly. I'll leave it at that. So the game they had against the Packers, they had like literally their top 3 receivers get hurt. Christian Kirk's obviously out for the year. He's not like even like a top 20 receiver probably, but he's a good slot receiver, and he's somebody who Trevor Lawrence has a lot of chemistry with. So obviously they're missing him. Stepping up in his place has been Parker Washington, like he's pretty athletic. He has generally good hands. He's better, honestly, in some like jump ball and contested situations than you would expect for a guy with a slot receiver build. It's just some of the small things, route details and stuff. He's obviously lagging behind a guy like Christian Kirk. Like last week, he catches a pass just short of the sticks, and instead of falling backwards, he basically falls forward onto his face, and they end up getting the 4th down. But veteran player, probably Kirk, turns out into a 1st down. Last year when Trevor Lawrence got hurt against the Bengals, it was actually because, he was expecting Washington to run one route, and he did not run that route. And the offensive tackle was thinking, the quarterback's already got the ball out of his hands, ends up in Trevor Lawrence's lap, etc. So he's a talented player physically, but some of those little things, you still see kind of pop up from time to time. Brian Thomas is like 1,000 times better than I thought it. Like the way he is right now is what I thought like the best case for him in like 3 years would be. He legitimately at the start of camp looked very, very rough. Really bad in the red zone, really questionable hands, wasn't doing well with physicality at all. And then one day in practice, like halfway through camp, he made some crazy catch over a defensive back in red zone drills. And ever since then, he basically has not stopped making plays. He made crazy one-handed catch against the Chiefs a few days later after that play. And in almost every game this year, he's made a really impressive either deep catch or, a critical catch. Like last week was his quietest game of his career. He only got 4 targets, but one of his 2 catches was on like 4th and 13. And he was able to, pick up 17 yards just by getting open. So he does obviously the deep stuff really well, but I think he's a really underrated route runner, has a really good release package. His hands are still kind of iffy. I feel like he's bobbled like every other touchdown he's caught, where it's been like, wow, that was almost one of the worst plays of the game, but he ended up catching it. Other than that, Gabe Davis, if he plays, he doesn't pose much of a threat right now. He's either been injured all year or he just is not the guy that he was in Buffalo. I know he was like a really controversial player in Buffalo, like the is he good, is he bad kind of thing. The good has not been there very often for the Jaguars. Like he had the game in London against the Bears where he caught 2 touchdowns, but he also dropped 2 touchdowns, including on like the first drive of the game. It was probably the worst 2-touchdown game an NFL receivers ever had. And that kind of sums up the Gabe Davis experience in Jacksonville so far. It's TBD if he's going to play. He has a shoulder injury. And then they have guys like Devin Duvernay and Austin Trammell and Elijah Cooks, the last 2 off the practice squad, who are, they're happy to be there.
All right.
That's all I have on those 2.
Happy to be there. All right. And then a little bit on the tight ends. It felt like when Evan Ingram first signed with the Jaguars, there was like a kind of a career revival, but it seems like, hey, some of that's genuine talent. Some of that is there's no one else to throw to. Now it seems like he is like an important cog in the offense, but he's not hitting like those like league leading a tight end in receiving yards, kind of production numbers. And I don't know that, or I literally, I don't know. This is not me like saying it negatively. I don't know if he's gotten any better at blocking. My intuition is that he hasn't, but like, who's to say? Maybe you. But yeah, I mean, it also seems like, like he is a critical part of this offense and will continue to be because Christian Kirk is on IR. And I don't think Brenton Strange is like doing very much. There's like 4 tight ends on this roster that Brenton Strange is doing very much. Like what is kind of your approach to understanding like Evan Ingram?
Yeah, so Ingram, like to your point as a blocker, he's honestly a decent blocker in space because he does give good effort. And he's really more of an effort hustle guy. He's obviously not going to be blocking many guys in line. And when they try to make him like an insert and, get up on linebackers, it doesn't work very well. But, he's a good blocker in the screen game, getting outside into space. He's definitely been, I think, better than even they anticipated. Like they signed him to a 1-year deal when he first came in. He said at the time that, he wanted a 1-year deal because he wanted to prove himself. But like, even if that's the case, okay, they were signing him to like max a 2-year deal for okay money, not great money. He's obviously been much better than he was in New York. Like that touchdown catch he made against the Packers and like triple coverage 2 weeks ago. It was funny seeing like Giants fans react to that because they were like, literally, where the hell was that?
Wait, where was this guy? Yeah.
He still has drop issues from time to time, but he's still, even with that, probably one of their more reliable players. They don't send him downfield as much as they should. He's more of like a underneath or, under 10 yards kind of guy. Like last year, he had, that super rare 100 catches for a tight end season. And then you look and he has like 8 yards a catch. So yeah, that's kind of sums up, his role in the offense. Brenton Strange was like last year, probably one of the, like he was a good blocker, but as a pass catcher, probably one of the least valuable tight ends in the league last year. The upside for Brenton Strange is that when Evan Ingram got hurt during the pregame warmups in week 2 this year, Strange had to come in and, since then he had like a 4 catch for 60-yard game that week against the Packers when he got randomly inserted because they lost 3 receivers. He ends up catching, I think, 5 passes for 59 yards, gets 2 explosive gains to get them into the end zone. He's a really impressive blocker. It's just in the passing game, it seems like he's literally only utilized when they're absolutely like dropping like flies. And even last week, like you would think, missing two of your top receivers, and Brian Thomas isn't 100%. You would think they would have went with more 12 personnel against, the Eagles. He only ends up playing 9 snaps, which is kind of like the Brenton Strange story so far. It's, he has shown flashes. He just genuinely is not a part of their passing game. It's just, they're not really designing things for him.
All right. And it doesn't seem like I don't know what their approach is in the run game. I don't know if that's a lack of knowledge on my part or a criticism. Okay, it sounds like a criticism, right? It certainly seems like Tank Bigsby is running back 1. Can you describe the running game and then also the running backs?
Yeah, so their running game this year has been, if you look at the raw numbers, like yards per carry, stuff like that, even rushing EPA, they're way up from where they were last year. Last year, they were 31st in rushing EPA and 32nd in rushing success rate. They were legitimately better off throwing it 60 times a game than even wasting plays as a running team because they just couldn't get it done. This year, their numbers are up, but it's a kind of smoke and mirrors because a big reason their numbers are up is because Tank Bigsby, once or twice a game, is breaking off a 40-yard run where, he gets hit behind the line of scrimmage and is able to, break several tackles and kind of salvage the entire run game. The run game's been very reliant on Tank Bigsby explosives. The only real game they haven't been where they've been able to kind of establish the run and get those consistent, 7-8 yard carries was against the Patriots when they ran 20 running plays in a row. Other than that, and Patriots been one of the worst teams in the NFL this year. That was the game that made Gerard Mayo openly call them soft. And other than that, their running game's really been boom or bust. They still get hit behind the line of scrimmage a lot. They're still a really bad team in short yardage. The best thing they have going for them in short yardage is trying to do QB sneaks for the first time in Trevor Lawrence's career. One of the funny moments during the Urban Meyer year was he was asked about, you guys are a really bad short yardage team. Why doesn't Trevor do quarterback sneaks? And he said, he never practiced them, in Clemson and stuff. And we're like, well September, maybe
you can fix that, man. You have practice, man.
Exactly. So this is the first year they've honestly leaned into quarterback sneaks, and it's been working for them, but it's the only thing in short yardage that does. So I think, Travis Etienne has dealt with injuries on and off this year. He's had shoulder injuries earlier in the year. He missed 2 games with a hamstring injury. And watching the Eagles game, it was, blatantly obvious, this guy isn't 100%. And even Travis, speaking in the locker room leading up to the week, I personally thought he wasn't even going to play because he was saying things the best advice I got about my hamstring was from Tyson Campbell, who told me, if you feel good, give it another week. So in my head, I'm like, okay, he's going to give it another week. And then they put him out there and he can't,
fantastic.
He can't break like any tackle. He's clearly hobbled. So I think that they want to utilize both guys. Like literally, okay, every team wants to utilize running like two running backs like David Montgomery and like Jahmyr Gibbs. So that'd be like a complete fallacy to say that's what they want. But I think they want like that idea. You know, they want to be able to utilize both guys. Tank Bigsby's much better in between the tackles than ETN. But on the flip side, Tank Bigsby is basically unplayable in any passing situation. He struggles as a blocker. His hands are why he didn't really play last year. He like openly led to several turnovers and like game-changing plays as a receiver last year. So they don't trust him to play as a receiver. Whereas ETN, you know, he's a better blocking back. He's a much better receiver out of the backfield, but he just isn't as consistent in between the tackles as Bigsby. He's like a guy who he gets 2 yards, he gets 2 yards, he gets 2 yards. Oh, wow, he got 15 yards. Whereas Bigsby is getting positive plays more consistently. And that Bigsby not really being able to play on third downs is also why you see a decent amount of Dearness Johnson last week on the last play of the game for the Jaguars. Somehow their play call on like 1st and 10 from the Eagles 13 with 1:42 left, they called for a wheel route to Dearness Johnson in the corner of the end zone. And surprisingly, the jump ball to the shortest player on the team, their number 3 running back, resulted in a negative play for the offense. But you see him in those situations because they don't necessarily trust Tank. So you'll see Dearness as a receiver and a blocking back, I would assume, a decent amount this week.
Yeah, I was just looking into total rushing EPA versus rush success rate, and Jacksonville is like 7th in rushing EPA and 17th in rush success rate, which strongly suggests it's big play dependent.
Yeah.
Great. Good. When you take a look at that Vikings defensive line, you got Harrison Phillips, Jonathan Grenard, etc. I mean, the Jaguars have played against Jonathan Grenard before. This has statistically been a very good run defense. Is this one where you think that they might have to rely on explosives, or those explosives even going to be there? It sounds like your opinion is that, relying on explosives is not very sustainable and it's going to come back to bite you. Like, what is your approach taking a look at how the Vikings have been able to do this?
No, I'm 100% with you. It hasn't been sustainable. That's why, like, in games where they need to be able to run, they haven't been able to. And it's almost like their running game is like, it's working today. That's nice, kind of rushing attack. So I think that, they want to, their big thing has been, starting off really slow in the last couple of weeks. They the first 4 drives against the Packers and neither punts or interceptions. They didn't get their second first down last Sunday until 9 minutes and 34 seconds left in the third quarter. So
whoa, can you say that sentence again?
Yeah, they didn't get their second first down against the Eagles until 9 minutes and 34 seconds left in the third quarter. They had 31 net yards and 1 first down at halftime.
Christ almighty. All right.
And then they do things like march up and down the field the second half to the point where you're like, even some of the players, I talked to this week are like, okay, we don't understand why the hell they can play well in the second half of a game and then literally do nothing in the first half. So I think for them to want to stay on the field in the first half, I don't know if they trust their rushing attack to do that. So I think they're going to come out trying to pass, trying to pick up, quick hitting passes and stuff just to generate first downs. And then I think they're going to try to use the run to supplement that. I don't think they're going to come out of the gate saying, okay, we want to, get Tank Bigsby established right away. I think they want to see that they can stay on the field first and then get to the running game as a complement to that.
All right. So now to talk about the offensive line. You've got Walker Little, elite franchise left tackle, obviously. Because why else would they trade Cam Robinson, right? Can you tell me, so there's reports that Cam Robinson was really upset that he got benched and demanded a trade. I don't know. Can you tell us about not just who Cam Robinson is a player, what Vikings fans can expect now that first game with him is over and he's actually got time to practice with the team? Maybe, what teammates thought of him being upset. I don't know, how that story plays out off the field.
Yeah, I don't think it was a thing where he demanded a trade necessarily. I think so. The context of the Cam situation was he gets hurt on the 5th play of the week before, leaves the game with a concussion protocol. Mm-hmm. He clearly doesn't practice during the week because he doesn't clear a concussion protocol until Saturday. And this is just my assumption. I'm not giving anything insider here. My assumption is I think Cam thought once he cleared the protocol, okay, I'm going to start because, he has started. He started 98 games for the Jaguars or so, nearly 100 games. So natural assumption for him. He never once in his career until that game was healthy and sat behind Walker Little. Walker Little is a 2nd round pick and it's become a pretty good bit among their fans. It's okay, when you pick this guy in the 2nd round to literally have him lose a training camp battle every single year. I think they both franchise tagged and extended Cam Robinson after drafting Walker Little. So it obviously led to a lot of,
incredible.
Yeah. Angst amongst people there. So he goes throughout the week not practicing. I'm assuming he thinks he's going to start. Whereas the Jaguars, they have Walker Little practicing the entire week. Obviously sitting at 2-5, then, Walker Little's in the final year of his contract. There's probably, not a bad idea to see, okay, can this guy actually play, for the future? I would assume.
Good time to find that out.
Yeah, right. I would assume Doug Peterson and Trent Baalke aren't even going to be the ones to make that decision. But if you're a general manager or head coach, you're so, ego driven that you're thinking they're going to turn things around and you will be the one making that decision. So it just kind of seemed like, perfect timing. I saw reports of Cam not wanting to go into the game or anything like that. I can say from my perspective, the way the Jaguars press box is literally right over the Jaguars sideline. So you can see guys coming off the field, who's talking to who, et cetera. Very easy view. And there were several times throughout the game where Jaguars coaches, mainly Doug Peterson and offensive line coach Phil Rauscher, were having pretty animated conversations with him. Like Doug Peterson had one where he was like, you could tell, like, however many feet I am up in the air in the press box, that Doug Peterson looked pretty pissed. He was like very animated, pointing at Robinson and pointing at the field and stuff. He dressed out, but when they went with extra offensive linemen on the field, which normally they bring on an extra tackle, they didn't bring on a tackle this time. They brought in Cooper Hodges. It was the first time Cooper Hodges had been the sixth lineman all year, and he ends up getting completely destroyed on the play because...
What a shock.
Yeah, this isn't something he ever does. It's either walk a little or, well, no, it's been only walk a little. But in this case, you would think it'd be Cam Robinson. And then they, at different points in the game, lose their right guard and left guard. And Walker Little has played guard before. So you would think, okay, having their best 5 players out there to, protect their $250 million quarterback, they'll have Walker Little and Cam Robinson out there in some kind of combination. That didn't happen either. He didn't play a snap. It was just very clear to me that the Jaguars wanted, to see what they had in Little, but that came at the expense of Cam Robinson's literally been a starter since he was drafted in the NFL. He's never been a backup. And the thing with Cam, I had, a good friend who's a Vikings fan, asked me, like, is there any way he can play guard? Like, can they re-sign him after this year and put him next to Darius Slaughter?
That's such a Vikings fan question.
It is.
Good Lord. Yeah.
And the answer was absolutely not, because Cam Robinson has completely rejected the idea of ever taking a snap anywhere but left tackle at this time in the Jaguars. Which exactly, you're the left tackle. You don't need to be giving up potentially your job to anybody. It's like, I don't know. It's like building job security for himself, really. If you play guard one day, maybe they're going to put you there and try to put somebody else at left tackle. So it was just obvious, watching the sidelines of that game. I had never seen anything like it. I've seen, players,
especially that head, offensive line coaches are hotheads, so I could just see them doing that the whole game. The head coach getting distracted from the other stuff happening in the game to yell at the backup tackle.
It's while the offense is on the field too.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
So, with the offensive players, even if you're not starting or whatever, if you're on offense, you're right there with the rest of the offense on the sideline, just in case your number gets called.
Yeah.
In this game, the offense is all huddled together on the sideline while the offense is on the field, and Cam's he's filling up Gatorade cups and just hanging out by himself. It was a good bit. And honestly, Cam Robinson, he's a good player. He has a lot left in the tank. He had a brutal first 3 weeks of the season, to the point where I can say, they were considering benching him at one point. I think it was in week 4, but he ended up playing great against the Texans in week 4. I know because I saw a million all 22 clips from Vikings Twitter of that week 4 game against the Houston Texans. He had a really good game that week. He had played pretty well from that point on, but it just became a time they were like, okay, we kind of need to get a look at the future. I don't even think they were necessarily shopping Cam Robinson. Once that happened, I think they were like, okay, how can we, get the hell out of the situation? But Cam's a really good pass protector. He's not a great run blocker, which I do think a lot of the decision to go to Walker Little also played into that. He's a weird player because he's a super physical player, and he's known as
crazy strong.
Yeah, and he's known as the nasty dude in the offensive line, but it translates more to pass blocking as opposed to run blocking. But he's good in space. He's good on screens and getting to the second level because he's still a good athlete. He'll struggle at times with guys getting to the inside. He oversets a decent bit, but he's still a solid player. He's very clearly a starting quality tackle in this league. Teammates always were really big fans of Cam Robinson. I can't say that the coaching staffs always were, even, not even just present company included, but past coaching staffs, but teammates. He was probably one of the more popular guys inside the Jaguars locker room. And I think that while some Jaguars players probably saw it and was like, all right, come on, dude. I think a lot of them probably understood it too, to an extent. You're a starter who is suddenly not a starter because, you're seemingly because you were in concussion protocol. So I think it was just a weird situation. And I think, it worked out for both sides, especially worked out, for the Vikings. And he's going to face a lot of Josh Hines-Allen this week. Josh Hines-Allen basically only lines up on that side. And they had good battles before in training camp. But like Josh Hines-Allen said today, like in the locker room, that he's never gone against Cam Robinson. Somebody was like, what are you talking about? We've seen you practice against him for like 6 years. And he's like, yeah, but that's not even anywhere close to a live rep. So I think that's going to be a cool storyline in this game.
Yeah. Is there anything else along the rest of that offensive line worth paying attention to? I know Ezra.
They are starting their third string left guard.
Blake Hance. Great. Blake Hance. Okay.
That's right.
Yeah, because Cooper Hodges is hurt, right?
Yeah, so Ezra Cleveland won't play.
Yeah, and
Well, that's not official, but Doug Peterson said today that like Ezra Cleveland's ankle injury is similar to Mason Smith's, and he's like, well, Ezra's behind Mason Smith in his recovery. Mason Smith hasn't played in like 3 weeks, so I would assume that Ezra Cleveland doesn't play this week.
Yeah. Mitch Morse, is he like good, or is he?
Yeah, no, he's also been good, like better than I honestly thought he'd be. Like I think they were hoping that he would be better than Luke Fortner level good, but he's probably been better than that.
Yeah, cool. And Brandon Sheriff, he's washed.
He's nowhere near like the Brandon Sheriff of like 5 years ago, but he's honestly had kind of a resurgent season. Like he's much better this year than he was last year. And his body's held together by like chicken wire and duct tape at this point.
Yeah, no, he's had a rough go of it. And then Anton Harrison, right tackle, enormous guy. That's all I know about him.
Yeah, he had a really strong season last year. The Jaguars leave their tackles kind of on islands a lot. They honestly barely even chip. Like his second game of his career, he went against Chris Jones, and they gave him like 0 chip up whatsoever. And Chris Jones just completely teed off on him, as you would expect. He's a solid tackle. I'd say a lot like Cam Robinson was really brutal the first 3 weeks of the season, but from week 4 on, he's been, I'd say, solid. But he's not like a young Tristan Wirfs or anything like that, where you saw him like in his first or second year and like, okay, that guy's going to be a top 5 tackle in a year or two. Like he's a starting tackle. Yeah, and I'd say that's about where I'd go with it.
Defensive side of the ball, Trayvon Walker actually having, bad, but let's talk about the individual players. Trayvon Walker, it feels like, so I don't think there's anything he can do that'll allow him to live up to his pick. So let's shelf that for a second. But it seems like he's playing all right now, recently.
No, he really is. Like, so he got 10 sacks last year, and that obviously got so many people like, oh, he is, turned the corner. He's becoming the pick. But like his pressure numbers last year were like,
they were bad.
Abysmal. It was very clearly that they were like Fugazi sacks. Whereas this year, I think he's one of the league leaders in like sacks created. It's like a true media stat.
Right.
It's obviously very much sounds like a stat that people cherry pick to say, no, this guy's actually good. But it's actually been a thing with Trayvon this year. Like this is very clearly the best Trayvon's play. He was not like a starting level pass rusher his first 2 years, even with 10 sacks. This year, I'd say he's, definitely been more consistent as a pass rusher. He's showing, more moves than he's shown before. And I think a big thing is they went from a 3-4 to a 4-3. And I know it's such a minute detail, but he has said repeatedly, like, he is much better coming off the ball with his hand in dirt as opposed to standing up. It's what he's basically done his whole life. And he was really miscast as a 3-4 outside linebacker. I think playing defensive end is really more natural for him. And he's, as all the scouting reports said, he's fantastic against the run. He can, he's probably, I'd say, like for like a guy you expect to be a top-notch run defender, his tackling kind of sucks. To be honest, he normally has really bad missed tackle rates, but he's really good at setting edges, sniffing out screens, end arounds, jet sweeps, that kind of stuff.
Why isn't Eric Armstead like on the? What's going on,
dude? It's been the best bit of the Jaguar season. I believe he's played more snaps at defensive end as a 30-something-year-old 3 technique than he's played inside this season. And he's been as expected at it. Like it's like when Gus Bradley, it's like when Gus Bradley used to try to make Jared Autrick and Red Bryant like defensive ends. You know what I mean? Like it's very clearly like this guy can't do it. And I don't think anybody even knows now between the Jaguars and him, whose idea it was to play him there. Tony Bazzelli, the Jaguars, literally their only Hall of Famer, said before the season started, he has a radio show with Pete Prisco that the Jaguars produce. He said that the word was that Eric Armstead wanted to play more defensive end at this stage in his career, and that's why he's come to the Jaguars. Whereas, it seemed like you listened to Ryan Nielsen talk last week, and he's like, oh, well, that was kind of our plan for him from the start, was to play defensive end. That was our idea. So no idea whose idea it actually was, but it very clearly has been a bad one. The few times he does play inside, he's honestly he's looked okay, but his pressure numbers are probably the worst of his career, I'd say. He's not been anywhere close to an impact player, for them. And last week, they kept him at defensive end almost the entire game. And the Eagles were just spamming zone read at him to the extent where Jalen Hurts was even making the wrong read on the give sometimes. And he's just so slow on the edge that it literally did not matter. He's too slow to crash. I told somebody that when he's on the edge, he moves like the giant marshmallow monster from Ghostbusters. And that he looks completely different inside, but on the edge, it's brutal. And I'd imagine you see him more on the edge this week.
All right. But you do have a genuinely good player, Josh Hines Allen.
Oh yeah. Dude, he's only been on the team for since 2019. He's 5 sacks away from the franchise sack record. Which
wait, what? Come on! I mean, I know the team is not old, but what?
Yeah, so there's a very real chance he can hit that this year, and it's been a weird year for him. In terms of pressures and pressure rate, he's not as good as he was last year when he was completely insane. But he's still been probably a top 15 edge in terms of just pass rushing efficiency. But the sacks haven't really come in bunches like they did last year. He's also noticeably bigger this year, which I think the team probably wanted because he's playing more defensive end. And I think you can kind of tell it's taken maybe, a step out from, what he was last year just in terms of as a pure athlete. But he's still somebody who, last week against the Eagles, he had 2 sacks, made a lot of plays against the run. He's still somebody who can completely take over a game. And like I said, he's still getting a lot of pressure. It's just the sack numbers aren't necessarily there yet. But, as you know, sack numbers are really, hard to rely on year to year. Pressure is much more of an indicator of how disruptive a guy is on a consistent basis.
Cool. And then any interior defenders worth talking about?
Interior defenders?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. No.
Great. Cool. Moving on.
They picked Mason Smith in the second round. He's been a healthy scratch twice and has otherwise hurt his ankle. He's been, whatever. Tyler Lacey, Jeremiah Ledbetter, Jordan Jefferson, they're football players, and that's about the extent of
that's
analysis.
Accurate.
Yeah. And
definitely
Devon Hamilton, I think, is a pretty good defensive tackle. He really good motor, can make plays sideline to sideline. But I do think he's kind of miscast as a one technique. I think this entire front seven going from a 3-4 where they consistently had 5-man fronts to a 4-3 to where now they have 3 linebackers on the field and only one of them is kind of good, has, really kind of shut their front seven down this year.
With this defense, has the LSU thing been intentional or what's sorry, it's just Jordan Jefferson, Mason Smith, and then obviously Travon Walker. Is that on purpose?
Their inside linebackers coach was LSU's defensive coordinator last year.
Oh, okay. That actually probably does matter then.
Yeah. And I also think Mason Smith was a bulky pick, to a T. This completely gargantuan person who looks like he was created in a lab and looks like a Madden player, but does not yet have any actual football skills or production. That's literally almost every Trent Baalke pick, ever. So I think that was probably the bigger part. He literally compared him to Chris Jones in his post-draft presser. He's like, I don't want to give a lofty comparison, but he can be a Chris Jones type.
But he is the best defensive tackle in the league. I don't want to be lofty, but he is the best.
Exactly.
It's crazy that we got him in the second round.
Yeah.
I wonder what Taven Bryan's up to. No,
not much.
The Vikings just played against him. And you're right, not much. So this linebacker group, I remember the first 8 weeks of Devin Lloyd's career. That was pretty cool, right? That was nice.
He ever since that horseshoe got surgically removed from his hind region, he's been a different player. Like that, it was crazy, man. Like balls were literally just bouncing towards him. Like I think he won like defensive rookie of the month or something like that. He's another guy who so when he came into the league, he honestly looked like a safety. Like he was really skinny, really long and lanky. And then they made him put on a ton of weight this season to play more downhill because that's what they needed out of their linebackers in their new scheme. And he is better coming downhill this year, but like that, athlete that people thought he was coming out of Utah, you just don't really see that on the field. And like he's a big liability in pass coverage. He can play moving forward, but if you get him, like if you do like any kind of preset motion or eye candy or anything like that, or force him to move backward, he's just not making, many plays.
I know the Vikings offense. That does not sound like a good sign for this guy.
No, it very much doesn't. It literally feels like he gets a bullseye on him every time he plays somebody from like the McVay or Shanahan scheme.
Great, good. Crossing routes all day, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, Foya Luakun, I've always liked this dude. I liked him in the draft, maybe because I like super athletes. This guy was lining up in the slot. Of course, he was playing for Yale or something. So
I was going to say, did you know he's from Yale? It's never mentioned.
Yeah, no one ever talks about it. I was using it as an insult, but yeah, I guess people are impressed by it. It's he lined up in the slot against fucking Princeton.
Yeah.
Him and Yoshivas must have had some crazy bad. No, but he's good though, right? He's a good linebacker. Yeah.
No, he really is. He makes a ton of tackles to the point where some people kind of assume he's you're making a ton of tackles 10 yards down the field kind of thing. Now he's legitimately a good.
The Chad Greenway? Yeah, no, I'm familiar.
Yeah. he's legitimately a really good linebacker. He's probably not elite at any one thing, but he tackles well. He flies to the football. He has good range. He's not a net negative in coverage. I'd say his biggest issue in coverage is he gets a ton of pass deflections because it looks like he's never caught a football before. But other than that, he's consistently, I'd say, behind Josh Hines-Allen over the last few years. He's probably been their best player.
All right, cool. So we just covered a unit that has some good players that are playing well, and then also another unit where you kind of see where these players fit. And the problem is the Jaguars rank last in the NFL in defensive EPA per play. And the conversation that we just had about these two units would strongly suggest that should not be the case, no matter how weak these defensive tackles might be. So let's talk about the secondary. These are all names that at some point I liked a lot. I like Ronald Darby coming out of the draft. I thought Tyson Campbell last year was kind of interesting. I was way too stuck on Darnell Savage when he was with the Packers as a good player. Packers people kept on telling me I got to stop. And I was but remember
they're weird
pick that he got as a rookie. Yeah.
They're so weird, man.
And then Andre Sisco is a guy that I think has actually flashed. Is this the reason the Jaguars? I didn't even mention Antonio Johnson. Is this unit the reason that the Jaguars are last in defensive EPA per play?
I mean, I think it's a mix of them and a mix of the scheme. Ronald Darby, 5 or 6, even probably 2 or 3 years ago, he has no problems in a man coverage press heavy scheme, running with guys. But Ronald Darby at this stage of his career, he's 31, which is the time when corners start falling off.
I hate this, man. I remember him as a draft prospect, Florida State, crazy 40. I hate this. Oh, he's old. He won a Super Bowl with Doug Peterson with the Eagles.
And the funny thing is, he had great coverage metrics last year, and it seemed they signed him to a really small 2-year deal that was really a 1-year deal. It seemed the hope was we can squeeze the last good year out of him, but it's become very apparent that year was last season, and that he's kind of really hit that fork in the road. So that's part of it. Is they're asking a corner who can no longer run with speed like Devonta Smith. He gave up a huge play to him in the end zone last week. Ronald Darby a couple of years ago can probably keep up with Devonta Smith. Ronald Darby this year he just can't. And when they were facing injuries in the secondary earlier in the year, when Tyson Campbell and Darnell Savage both missed several games, they were still running like man coverage and press coverage at the highest rate, of the league. Like against the Buffalo Bills, they had like 4th-string like cornerbacks out. Like Jarian Jones got hurt that game too, so they had their 3rd-string slot cornerback in the game, and they're still just running man coverage every single play. And they show the coaches on the sideline looking like completely befuddled on, why is this not working? So I think that's been a big thing, but I also think like Darnell Savage was really good in the slot for them to start the year, but Antonio Johnson was so bad at safety. And he was somebody who he was good last year, but he just this year it was a brutal start to him. This change in scheme, I that's the only thing I can think of because he was really flashy under Mike Caldwell, and then he looks unplayable this year because Antonio Johnson was struggling so much. They moved Darnell Savage back to safety and put Jarian Jones at nickel. Jarian Jones has honestly been really solid in the slot, but Darnell Savage, as the Green Bay Packers, made very clear, is better in the slot and not at safety. So, they got marginally better at safety, but now Darnell Savage is playing worse. Tyson Campbell battled a hamstring injury at the start of the year, but he's probably their 3rd or 4th best defender, when healthy. He's a good number 1 corner. He's not like elite or shut down or anything like that, but he's a good corner. And then Andre Sisco is probably, I'd say, compared to the preseason expectations, he was like consistently picked in like those like listicles of like potential breakout players and contract years who can cash in. He was consistently listed in those, and he's been probably one of the worst starting safeties in football this year. I don't understand why, but a lot of blown coverages, a lot of missed tackles. It's easily been his worst year as a Jaguar, and it's kind of come at the worst possible time.
Hell yeah. I mean, that's bad.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Okay, but I mean, like, okay, so against a receiving corps that has Justin Jefferson and, other guys are playing really well. Jordan Addison's playing well. Jalen Naylor, in my opinion, is playing very well. But, there's the sun and then there's the planets, right? It's Justin Jefferson. Do they modify their approach to an elite level receiver to maybe double this guy more often? Or are they just going to be like, yeah, man, we're a press man team. That's just what we're going to do. Ronald Darby, here you go. You got it. I trust you, man. Like, what's the approach here to Justin Jefferson?
So Doug Peterson got asked today if Tyson Campbell would follow Justin Jefferson, and like he paused for like legit like probably 10 seconds, and then he goes, "No, I don't think so." And goes, he said, I think it's 2 ways you can look at it. You can take your best corner and put it on the best receiver, or you can put your best corner on their second receiver and put 2 guys on the best.
Yeah, that's the Belichick. Yeah.
That's what teams do. That's what defenses do. So we'll see how the week unfolds. So that's what defenses do. So it seems like that's what they're going to try to do is put Ronald Darby and kind of shade a safety toward him. But
yeah,
it basically never works out when they do that. So I don't know.
But historically, okay, yeah, gotcha. I don't. Do you know what the spread is for this game? I haven't been looking. Let's take a look.
Let me look real quick. I haven't been either. The Jaguars, I think this year, like 5-4 against the spread. Like despite their terrible record, like they've been in so many 1-score games. Yeah, it's Minnesota by 4 points. So
yeah,
I don't know. Jacksonville's been like in a 1-score game every single week, but like 3 games this year. So I could see it happen. Like they're the dumbest team. They're 2-7, obviously a horrible record, but they're like consistently playing playoff teams down to the wire. They just shoot themselves in the foot with a 12-gauge shotgun at several times throughout the game. So I do think they probably keep it close-ish, but I wouldn't I could see them covering the spread, but I'm not going to pick them.
Cool. Oh, by the way, any special teams notes at all?
If Devin Duvernay plays, he'll obviously return punts. If he doesn't, Austin Trammell fumbled his first punt return last week.
All right.
Fair caught his second one, and then after Fair catching it, not after the fumble, but after he fair caught one, he was benched for Parker Washington. So that's kind of been their return game this year. Cam Little, the kicker, rookie out of Arkansas, he's honestly been really good for them. This year he's I think only missed 1 or 2 kicks, but he's been really consistent for them. And Logan Cook is probably it's a disgusting sentence, but he's probably one of the AFC's more underrated punters.
That's a brutal sentence.
Yeah, no, it's terrible. He's a good player. Their returning game is probably the worst part of their their special teams right now.
All right. Anything else? Like, did you want to get to something? I didn't ask you the question. Anything else notable that you wanted to get to?
No, I don't think so. I want to, last thing I guess I want to ask you is, has the Doug Peterson clip made its rounds to Vikings Twitter yet?
Jesus. I think no. I don't know. I like every year I'm more disconnected from Vikings Twitter. They're all goblins. So
yeah. Dude, so earlier today, before I get to the Doug Peterson video, earlier today, I saw this like absolute cesspool of an account. I know I shouldn't engage with, but I was thinking, okay, maybe there's something.
I've been there. Yeah, I deeply understand. Yeah, continue.
It's called Vikings with a Z fan page, and they were like, newly acquired Vikings tackle Cam Robinson was quotation marks frustrated with the Jaguars when they benched him, and then he's like, he gets to face them this week with a demon emoji. Obviously, a very silly post, but I retweeted and I said, actual Minnesota media, is there any source to this? When random quotation marks do not help me, because I was curious if he actually said himself that he was frustrated.
Yeah, the word frustrated. Yeah.
And then he like links me to another tweet of his account. Like,
oh yes,
like rewording what like Darren Wolfson said on the radio, and like he said, "Oh, Robinson didn't take it." He said that Darren Wolfson said Robinson didn't take it very well when the Jaguars told me it wasn't starting, and I was like, "Oh, well,
marks though, man, that's not the same."
Exactly, and I'm like, "Oh, well, I could have told you Cam was frustrated in the 50 times I wrote that him and the coaches were arguing on the sideline. That wasn't like, I was like, oh, did Cam Robinson actually say this? And it turns out he did not. So, and I was like, oh, okay, that's absolutely nothing then. No, the Doug Peterson clip is he was asked about Sam Darnold today and like why he thinks he's playing so well. And he like pauses and looks at the beat and he goes, Justin Jefferson, and like looks like with his hands out. He's like, what do you want me to say?
And then, come on, man.
He goes on to like say other stuff about, you know, how well he's playing and the system and stuff. But like when he said it, I was like, oh, Jesus Christ, Doug.
That is exactly the kind of thing that would have already made the rounds in Vikings Twitter. I should probably log on to Twitter at some point today.
I specifically did not tweet it. I did not want those mentions.
That's so funny, man. Oh, yeah, here it is. Demetrius got it. Of course he did.
Of course.
I'll retweet it. Yeah. Retweet with no comments. Great. Cool, man. Where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. It's at John. No, wait, my bad. At _John _Shipley. Of course, there's a John Shipley in Minnesota who.
Yeah.
He is
John
not
Shipley
yet,
tier 3. Love him.
Yeah, he hasn't yet accepted my battle to the death for the account, but I think he's older than me, so I'm going to just wait him out and get it in like 20, 15 years, whatever. But that's where you can find me. Jaguars on SI, si.com/NFL/Jaguars. Boots in the ground in the stadium a couple days a week. And I have been fatigued and war aged by this franchise since 2019. So if there's any irrelevant or even relevant Jaguars thing you want to know, I can probably help you out because for better or worse, this franchise has consumed my professional life.
Yeah, that's true. John is dangerously plugged in to the detriment of his health, and I do nothing but encourage this behavior.
Exactly.
All right, man. Thanks for hopping on.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
All right, before we get to the mailbag, we wanted to go over some of the trade deadline, the last minute stuff that ended up happening here on Tuesday. And some of these things happened before the actual deadline itself, like Amari Cooper and everything. But there are a number of interesting moves, and Arif just wants Arif's going to go through and kind of judge some of these in his proper judgy way.
You say like now it's against my will, right?
No.
Well, Arif, it's not that Arif wants to.
No, Arif has to judge. That's what Arif does.
Okay, let's talk about a couple of these. So this is a super busy trade deadline. I don't recall this many trades occurring at the deadline, especially ones with as many impactful players here. Not all of them are stars or anything like that, of course, but you've got a couple of players that I think are going to make some pretty big differences. A couple of players that probably won't be making a huge difference. Joshua Uche, who had one good year with the Patriots, was traded to the Chiefs for a 2026 sixth. As an edge rusher, the Chiefs are obviously, they've been looking for additional pass rush support. They've got a really great secondary.
a little bit banged up, but a really great young secondary, a great defensive coordinator. They've got George Karlaftis, who's like okay, Chris Jones, who's excellent, and that's kind of it in terms of rushing the passer. And so they add this guy. I don't know that he's going to move the needle that much, but he did have that one good year with the Patriots, so that's really cool. That was 2022, by the way, but he was drafted in 2020. I don't know. So out of those 5 years, not getting a ton out of him. He hasn't been that good this year. He hasn't been that impactful. He has been kind of like rotating in and out. So that I'm kind of curious. A couple of edge rushers were traded in this cycle. Preston Smith was traded from the Packers to the Steelers. That was for a 2025 seventh. That was a good trade for the Steelers, but I don't want to overstate it. I just think that because the compensation of a seventh is so low, that you're probably getting something out of this. Preston Smith has been a little bit cooked for the past couple of years, was better last year than this year, doesn't seem to be playing super well this year, has a contract that is a little bit onerous and stuff like that. So it's not as if that this is like an overwhelming, positive or anything like that, but it's nice that they have a little bit of additional depth. They've been needing that. The other edge rushers, I think, are much more impactful. So the Lions traded for Zadarius Smith. They gave up a 2025 fifth, and then they swapped their 2026 seventh for a 2026 sixth. So the end of that trade is like not that impactful. It's mostly the fifth that we care about. But no, I mean, Zadarius Smith is still a good player despite his age. The Vikings fans are familiar with Zadarius Smith both as an opponent and as a Viking. I mean, the Browns are in a weird spot, so it makes sense that they got, they're offloading people. This isn't the only player that they offloaded. Smith has been having a pretty good year. He's got like 27 pressures according to PFF. That is kind of in line with the number of pressures he had last year, which is 61 total. Not as up to the number of pressures he had with the Vikings in 2022, but still like a pretty positive player. The Lions, if you remember the interview that we had with the guest, just straight up out of pass rushers, just don't have any. And so having a viable starter guy, it's huge for a team that's already probably the best team in the NFC. So that helps them. That's unfortunate. The other edge rusher that was traded was Baron Browning. Was traded for a 6th round pick to the Cardinals. The Cardinals have also been like just severely lacking edge rushers. I think they're still relying on Dennis Gardeck, who is fine, like an undrafted fan favorite kind of guy. He's kind of a borderline starter talent. Baron Browning is a super underrated edge rusher, so I thought that this was like a really good get. I personally think that he can play at a starting level, so getting him for a 6th round pick, great move. So there's the edge rushers. The Steelers did make another move. I mentioned that. They grabbed Mike Williams from the Jets. Mike Williams was on the outs ever since the Jets traded for Devontae Adams. Mike Williams wasn't working. Aaron Rodgers clearly just doesn't like him. I don't know what else to say. The Steelers got him for a 2025 fifth. The Steelers don't have much outside of George Pickens. They let Deontay Johnson go to Carolina, who also will come up in this recap. Having Mike Williams, I think Mike Williams is still talented. Obviously a little bit injury prone. Having him, that's going to be kind of helpful. So good job to the Steelers. The other wide receivers that were moved, we've got DeAndre Hopkins, traded from the Titans to the Chiefs. It was a conditional 2025 fifth. That fifth turns into a fourth if the Chiefs make the Super Bowl this year, which decent chance, right? And DeAndre Hopkins plays 60% of his snaps for the Chiefs from the moment he gets traded to the Chiefs, which does seem likely at this point. So we'll say it's a fourth. Great. Good move. The Chiefs obviously have been out of receivers. Rashee Rice, not available. Xavier Worthy, not that good yet. Maybe doesn't seem like he's that good. So it's maybe like just like Travis Kelce. So great move for them. The Chiefs also grabbed, I already mentioned they grabbed Josh Uche. That was probably the most interesting trade. Amari Cooper was traded for a bunch of change and stuff like that, but a 2025 third. So the Browns traded him away. Bills got him. He hasn't played yet for the Bills, I don't think. And the Bills desperately need receivers. Keon Coleman is okay. He's a rookie, and that's kind of it. I expect the Amari Cooper to really pop off like once he's healthy enough to play. But the funniest trade of the trade deadline was Jonathan Mingo, another wide receiver. the Cowboys gave up as much for him as the Chiefs gave up for DeAndre Hopkins. Jonathan Mingo, former second-round pick, has been getting beat out by sixth-round picks, seventh-round picks, decrepit veterans, and just hasn't seen the field, despite the Panthers giving him every opportunity to see the field. It's not happening for him. He's got one of the worst yards per route run in the league. But Jerry said he liked him in the draft a couple years ago, so got to get him for a fourth for DeAndre Hopkins. That was the trade.
It's just a little ridiculous.
I don't. So there's that. Great, good work. Other than that, we've got a running back trade: Khalil Herbert, Bears to Bengals. That was for a seventh. The Bengals, obviously, Zach Moss is injured. We saw how much Chase Brown was asked to do. He's not as good of a pass protector. Not that Khalil Herbert is a pass protector either, but he's a little bit more useful in the passing game. So we'll see if he gets rotated in. I don't know. It was for a seventh-round pick. Khalil Herbert obviously wasn't getting much time with the Bears. So we'll see. But the most impactful trades, I think, happened at cornerback. So you only had two cornerback trades. One of them's not impactful. Tre'Davious White, Rams to Ravens. This is the other Ravens trade. He's cooked. He's no longer the guy that he was. He's traded for a 2026 seventh. It's like the minimum, the least you could possibly trade. Technically, the Vikings did trade for less when they got Cam Akers the previous year, which is nothing because he didn't meet the conditions for the trade. So I don't think he's going to do anything. But the Ravens did also grab Deontay Johnson, a wide receiver, who in a fifth round, sixth round swap from the Panthers. I think that, Deontay Johnson is one of the league's best at getting open without getting the yards you'd normally associate with somebody who gets open a lot. He's really good at getting open. And I think that's going to be a huge benefit. We didn't see that much in this game that we just saw. That's going to be a huge benefit. But I think the biggest trade is Marshawn Lattimore. The Commanders are having an insane season right now, like an incredible season, but they don't have a secondary, which is a problem for a team that suddenly has aspirations, right? With Jaden Daniels at quarterback. So they grabbed somebody who has one of the best yards allowed in coverage in the NFL right now. No one's talking about it because the Saints are awful, but Marshawn Lattimore has been very good. So they trade away a third round pick, a fourth round pick, and a seventh round pick. They get a fifth round pick back. Really incredible move by the Commanders. Probably the best trade in the cycle. More people are probably going to be talking about the DeAndre Hopkins trade by the end of the year, but that was a great trade. So that's what happened at the trade deadline. A lot of stuff. Cowboys screwed up. That's funny. We'll see if Amari Cooper's any good. DeAndre Hopkins is going to grab headlines, but the Marshawn Lattimore trade was incredible.
The Cowboys screwing up has kind of been the theme.
It's beautiful.
It's the theme of 2024.
Yeah, no, it's like it's how you know they're still the Cowboys. It's like, the topsy-turvy world. What can we hold on to remind ourselves of, what reality we're in? Oh my God, the Cowboys screwed up. Yeah, everything's going to be all right.
What was beautiful to me about the Cowboys thing is that, right around week 2 or 3, it was pretty clear what this team was. And it took until, last week for the rest of the world to, go, oh, yeah, they stink. They're terrible.
Yeah, and the Cowboys, injured quarterback and all that. And it's like, well, you were never going to turn the season around. Might as well just shut it all down.
Yeah, it's your defense is like a MASH ward, but sure, let's pretend. Let's pretend you guys can come back and take the 7th seed. Let's pretend. All right, let's go to the mailbag. And the first question is from Logan Bolsharif, who asks, question for Arif's development corner. During the Spielman era, you noted that Rick and company, and GMs generally, were often too slow to jettison drafted players, and especially quarterbacks. This was especially the case with Ponder. With Anthony Richardson's benching, there's been complaints that teams aren't developing quarterbacks. Do you think the league has gone too far in benching young quarterbacks, or should it have been this quick all along?
Well, Anthony Richardson specifically, it should not, from a developmental perspective or a giving up on a quarterback perspective, it should not have been that quick. If they have given up on Anthony Richardson, that's too fast. That's not to say it was wrong to bench him in this specific circumstance, which is that you've got a backup quarterback who you feel like can help you win games. And you're not really stunting this guy's development by benching him. You're just delaying it. So he's like a super young quarterback. So there's like a lot ahead for him. But if they have given up on him, it's way too fast. He hasn't even played like 16 games yet. But we're seeing kind of like different approaches all the time, right? The Cardinals gave up on Josh Rosen immediately. The Bears held on to Justin Fields. Josh Allen was held on to for quite a while. Develops, good move, right? It seems like, Brian Flores gave up on Tua. Turns out, didn't have to do that, right? It seems like it is kind of, we're seeing a wider variety in how teams are approaching, these younger quarterbacks and how quickly they're willing to, bench them or whatever. Generally speaking, we know enough about a quarterback after 2 years. Obviously, that's not always true, right? Josh Allen is a great example of that. But for the most part, we generally know after about like 1,000 attempts or so. So 2 years / 30 odd games. That's usually when we know. And so with Richardson, we're not even halfway to year 2, but he only played 4 games his rookie year. So it's not like we can't even count that. So we're like 8 or so games into this guy's career. There's no reason to give up on him. Obviously, the Cardinals were correct to give up on Josh Rosen, but I honestly think that the reason was less that they had correctly identified after a year that things were just over for him and more that they just really wanted Kyler Murray when they hired a new head coach. Good decision, but I don't think that the process was correct there. I think that we're seeing a wider variety. I still think that there are circumstances where you give up too early. Would I say the same thing about Bryce Young, who they clearly gave up on, but now they kind of have to play? Yeah, I guess. The thing is, I don't think benching is the same as giving up because I think that there's some development that has to occur off the field. I wrote about that in a quarterback development piece about Anthony Richardson when the Colts decided to start him last year, that a raw quarterback will sometimes benefit from being benched based off of the things that they need to improve and will sometimes benefit from playing based off of other elements that they need to improve. And this could be the difference between developing anticipation or, using one's eyes, quickly or, improving footwork or something like that. And so mechanical habits are probably something where you don't want to throw that guy into a game too early, but catching up to the speed of the game, really the only way to do that is on the field. So there's different reasons that one would want to bench or start a raw, quote unquote raw quarterback. Bryce Young is extremely bad at football and it doesn't seem like he's getting better. So I get why you would bench him. But I think from a process perspective, if you wanted to get him to get better sooner, you should probably play him because the issues are not mechanical. His anticipation is really good. You probably need him to figure out how to solve problems. And that's more likely going to happen on the field than off the field. So, yeah, but I get why the Panthers benched him, honestly. I don't think that's going anywhere. But I think you got to give yourself room to be wrong on those kinds of questions. And so figuring out what the best development path of this quarterback is and sticking to it is better than determining very early, I think I know. That's probably not a good approach.
I'm reminded of the tweet from the Arizona Cardinals saying that they were standing by Josh Rosen as their quarterback.
Yeah, they had a whole graphic, this is our quarterback. It was right before the draft, too. It was okay, man.
Yeah. Few things have aged that poorly that quickly.
Yeah.
On that. Roro asks, JJ McCarthy for Anthony Richardson. Who says no?
Probably everyone. Probably. Well, maybe the Colts don't say no. They don't seem super excited. So I think people are mostly asking this because of that clip that's going around of Kevin O'Connell mic'd up, giving Anthony Richardson a ton of encouragement, which I think plays a lot better than when CJ Stroud does it.
Just a little bit, actually.
Yeah, Kevin O'Connell just seems like a good dude. Maybe he wanted Anthony Richardson, so he's always been a believer. I don't know. There's a lot of reports that the Vikings liked him. I don't know how good those reports are. But no, obviously that's not like a thing. Like the Vikings might have liked Anthony Richardson. They love JJ McCarthy. They love this dude.
And there's all sorts of reasons too. I mean, you see him on the sideline now, going through the entirety of entirety of plays and everything, just like right off of the sheet.
Yeah, through the game day operation.
Yeah, this is, if you were looking for an internship of sorts, he's kind of getting it. Generic Vikings fan asks, what's your analysis of the mascot halftime game, and what mascots can they recruit in free agency to improve next year?
So whenever I see a mascot at halftime game, I always see Blue. Like, I know that Blue was there. It was a Colts game. It kind of makes sense. So there's a clip going around of the mascot game. For some reason, this one went viral, and like the 8,000 other examples didn't.
Of the touchdown this time?
Yeah.
Because normally it's just them bullying the kids.
Yeah, this is true. Blue laid out for a touchdown. That was awesome. Diving catch. You don't see that in a mascot game. But they also did bully the kids in this highlight. That also did happen. But like usually Blue is in them, and I don't know why in non-Colts games the Vikings, when they do have like a mascot halftime game, Blue is one of the mascots. But sure, and he always goes hard. Like he always is like crazy. He's always punishing children for like daring to be on the same field as him. I love that energy. If at some point,
as you can relate to that sort of thing,
right? No, yeah, it's a deeply relatable attitude. I feel like at some point he's gonna like pick up a child by the legs and swing them around like a hammer throw, and that's gonna be awesome. This is gonna be such a good highlight.
And they're not gonna call the penalty on it, no.
Right, yeah. I mean, those refs, we've seen them. They're useless. Goldie goes kind of hard. We see that a lot. Victor's okay, honestly.
Great arm that game, though.
Yeah, no, it's true. Mascots I would recruit, the Buccaneer. I don't know what his name is. I think he's probably got a good energy for that kind of game. Man, I'm trying to think of the other mascots around the league that I want, and a lot of the teams I'm thinking of don't even have mascots. Like I don't think the Steelers have a mascot. That guy's terrifying, right? Yeah. Or am I thinking of the Purdue Boilermakers? No. Okay, I'm right. He'd be okay to bring in. I still like the Buccaneer. Huh. Not the Patriot. That just because there's like a right kind of mean, and that's what like Blue is, and then there's like an uncomfortable kind of mean, and that's what I imagine the Patriot mascot is. So probably not.
Just not good visuals there.
Right, yeah. So I'll go with the Buccaneer.
What about the Bolt from
Oh
Chargers?
My gosh. Yeah.
There's your game changer.
Yeah, I think you have to.
That's that looks about right. Let's go to Eric the Red, who asks, why do trap games happen?
The NFL is hard. I don't know. It feels like this is supposed to be like a joke question, and I don't have like a joke answer. The NFL is hard. All these teams are good. It's not always like, team A underestimates team B. I'm sure that plays a role, but I think that narrative is used a little bit too often. I think it's more just Team B in film analysis kind of figured out a couple of key things that no one else had been able to figure out. And no matter how good or bad you are, like you're always going to be able to have those moments where you kind of identify a tell or a key weakness or something that'll allow you to gain a really generous advantage. And sometimes like bad teams are bad in very specific ways because of the way their team is constructed. And it just so happens that is like the weakness of the team you're playing against. I'm thinking about that Bills game, right, against the Vikings in 2018. One of the worst teams I've ever seen, right? We talked about that all the time. Awful team. Josh Allen was not good that year. There was like one guy on offense, and it was the offensive tackle. Just a terrible, terrible team. But Josh Allen was an extremely good athlete, and the Vikings just happened to have onboarding issues with their nickel corner and couldn't communicate with the linebacker. And so there were like busted coverages in that game and also a couple of hurdles. You might have seen them. And so it was just like the strength weakness profile was not good for the Vikings. And they had a specific problem in terms of their communication that, the Bills took advantage of. So that's like why trap games can occur. But like mostly it's that the NFL is hard and all these teams are good. And so sometimes, you've got one team and you've got a team that's slightly worse than them. And because of the circumstances and variance, the one that's slightly worse just blows the other one out.
The preview episode for that Bills game, it's rare to hear somebody talk about how terrible their team truly is. And this one was an all-timer. No,
they were miserable talking about their team.
They're like, the score of this is going to be 600-0, maybe 600-3, but probably 600-0. Just the biggest blowout you ever seen. Nick Howard asks, for Arif's changing names after getting signed corner, do you think new kicker John Romo or Parker Romo for his new name, or should we just refer to him as Tony Romo?
I think calling him Tony Romo is a good bit. I think every time, especially if he's like missing clutch kicks, I think at that point you got to start calling him Tony. If he's making it in clutch situations, he gets the full name. He gets John Parker Romo. But if he misses key important kicks, yeah, he's Tony Romo. Yeah,
but like the only time you hear a full name like that ends up being like for an assassin or like an attempted assassination.
But that's what I mean, right?
Oh, okay.
Like, if he's good, if he's making kicks, you got to give him like the deadly assassin name, his name, John Parker Romo. But if he's not doing it, if he's screwing things up, he's Tony.
Is that why it was never John David Booty? It was always John Booty or David Booty?
Yeah, that's famously how we always refer to him.
Yes, that's... Wow. Nolan Kaler asks, so this has got a link to it. For North Code, is this the moment where the football gods not only prove that they're smiling on our brothers in Bud Grant ahead of their Western final showdown with their also green rivals, but on the nation of Canada as a whole?
So Nolan Kaler sent us a clip of the Western Final Showdown, and in it, Edmonton Elks, I don't know, I didn't actually pay attention to the team names, but I know they wear green, are setting up for a punt, and as they're like lining up to snap, like the wind, which had been dead all game, kicks up tremendously, and you can see like leaves just start blowing on the field, like just out of nowhere. This wind just like pops up, and it had been dead the whole time, and now there's like gusts of like 18 miles an hour or something crazy like that. Like there was a ton of wind, ton of detritus just kind of floating around. You can see snow start to fall. Like it's just a bad time, and it appears in the final 30 seconds of this game. And I think the Elks are like 2 points ahead, if I remember correctly. And they punt and they just absolutely shank it. And it's very clearly like, okay, the weather impacted this. Either the weather picked up the ball and screwed up the punt, or the punter was overthinking the weather and screwed up the punt, or some combination of the two. And so the Bombers don't really have to advance the ball very much to get in field goal range. That's exactly what happens. They kick the game-winning field goal as time expires. Excellent work by them. And I think that's how you know that they cannot possibly be the Vikings' brothers and Bud Grant. Like, really? The gods conspire to help them make a game-winning field goal? That doesn't sound right.
No, that doesn't. Also, just for the sake of North Code, discussing Canada, Arif at one point mentioned that the wind was blowing about 18 miles an hour. That's 28.9682 kilometers an hour. I just want to make sure that we have the translation on that because we are discussing Canada. Let's go to Zach, who asks, for Arif's merch with Arif's face on it corner, will you help me convince my wife to let me buy my 4-month-old daughter the Arif onesie? So what's your hard sell?
Okay, look. It's vitally important that you build connections between children and parents. Building those bonds is not just obviously great for the child's mental health, but also allows you to impart like critical lessons as time goes on because the child buys into it. And one of the ways to build those bonds is to, get the child involved in shared interests. And very clearly, your husband, for some reason, loves this podcast and my face. I can't explain it, and I'm confident that you can't either. It's a mystery. But because that's the case, you're going to want to deepen and accentuate those bonds they build. Every opportunity you have to build that connection, you should consider taking, because it's a really important part of your child's development down the line. And, there are a lot of studies about, children participating in shared interests with their parents that suggest that it creates, even after you control for socioeconomic factors and all that, that it helps create better mental health outcomes for the child. And I wouldn't want you to be in a position where, 20 years from now, you think, shit about that onesie.
Insufficient daddying is something that you hear of. And really, what better way to get closer to your daughter than to have the kind of switch gender role there a little bit, have the father be there to be picking out clothes for the daughter. So
yeah, I mean, I just feel like you've got the ability to knock down the barriers that patriarchy creates. Why not take it?
This is accurate. Please update us as to whether or not this pitch worked. Let's go to Yannick, who asks, could Arif explain the pros and cons of Blue Sky and Threads, and are they a real alternative to Elon's disaster of an app?
Yeah, so one of the issues with social media is that it requires a high degree of adoption for it to be effective. I don't know how many of you recall, was it the Motorola Sidekick? That it had a lot of features that allowed you to interact in unique ways with other people who owned Motorola Sidekicks. And no one bought them because no one bought them. And it was a disaster. It was a failure. It was a huge failure. There are other handheld game consoles that are like that. You just have to beat a threshold. And I don't know that Threads is ever going to do that. And I'm concerned that Blue Sky might not be able to. Now, Blue Sky does have a lot of people that have migrated to the platform. And there are a bunch of communities there that are really happy that that's their social media application of choice. But I don't know how much of that is sports Twitter, especially NFL or football Twitter. But it seems like there's more and more of that. It just doesn't seem like it's self-sustaining on its own. That's just one where there's like a first mover disadvantage kind of thing, where if you're the only one there, it's going to be difficult. I am attempting to move over to Blue Sky. At some point it's probably something on GitHub, and then I'm going to have to deal with it because GitHub is not super user-friendly for people who are not programmers, but whatever, I'll figure it out. That'll allow me to mirror my tweets into Blue Sky without mirroring my replies. Which whoever has come up with that feature probably has already thought of the reply problem, so not a huge issue. But I don't want to live tweet games across 3 or 4 different social media platforms. I'd rather just stay on Twitter and do it, or stay on whatever and do it, and just be on the one. So it's kind of difficult. I don't like Threads for a couple reasons. One, it seems like there's a low adoption rate for overlapping communities in my interest. Weird lefty posters, sorry, James, is like the whole thing on Blue Sky. And I love that. So there's a bunch of people. Threads just seems to be like influencers from Instagram that like keep on posting like it's Instagram. And I hate Instagram captions because they are like vacuous and meaningless, which is not disqualifying on its own, but they're also not funny. And so there's like no value added. It's like, rainbow Doritos are a great way to support LGBTQ causes. That's not a tweet. No one would, well, there's one person who tweet that, but like, that's like not an interesting thing to say, but that's the kind of thing that you would see on Threads all the time. It's optimized for media, which is nice. and you can, upload 10 photos instead of 4, which I guess is kind of cool or whatever. But like the communities there and the type of engagement that's popular there sucks. Navigating your interactions kind of sucks. Like when you click on a thread, I guess, I don't know, like an individual post on Twitter is called a tweet. On Blue Sky is supposed to be called a post, but it's actually called a skeet. And technically on Twitter, it's just called a post too, but no one says that. But on Threads, I think it's a thread, which is very confusing because everywhere else, a thread is multiple posts linked together. But on Threads, I think a thread is one post. And then a thread on Threads is called a carousel, which is very stupid. But it is difficult to navigate carousels and figure out who's replying to what post or whatever. I don't like it. For IP reasons, all of them have like their interaction buttons in different spots, which sucks. So you have to kind of be cognizant of what you're clicking and where you're going. But yeah, I just don't like the community there. Blue Sky is also like really user customizable if you know what you're doing, which I don't, but other people are, and I just steal their customizations. So you get your own feeds and stuff like that. It's meant to be federated, which if you know what that means, you probably like it. I don't really like it, so it doesn't really matter. Which I guess can be useful. I don't really care about that. But yeah, I guess that's my pitch to join Blue Sky. My Blue Sky thing is at arif.bsky.social.
I think Blue Sky just announced they had like 14 million people on the platform as of today.
Yeah, people got mad about the election, and Elon obviously chose one side, and people didn't like that, so they went over to Blue Sky. A ton of people there now. Yeah, like Blue Sky used to be like invite only, and you had to like know someone. James knows who I know, that we were just talking about them earlier before the show, that got me that invite. Very weird circumstance, but I am one of the earlier users of Blue Sky, and I also happen to know the first person that got banned from both Blue Sky and Twitter. Well, it's kind of fun.
I will say the Threads takes your likes and really hones in on that as a subject. Like I had liked one person's comment about one person's post about sobriety, and I went, "Oh, that's a cool story," and hit like on it, and then now that's all I see.
Oh, it like aggressively,
yeah,
modifies your algorithm for okay.
Yeah, if I go onto Threads right now and take a screenshot, I'm willing to bet 8 of the top 10 posts will be about sobriety. And I was like, that's not really my bag, but sure, that's
right. Yeah.
I support it, but yeah. Let's go to Arif Luenza, who asks, for Arif's Travel Corner, I am in Seattle for a conference this week, and this morning I saw a Hyundai being towed. How long are you in town for?
God, Jesus Christ. God. No. No.
No? All right.
No.
Kyle Slaby asks, for Arif's Astrophysics Corner, it is theorized that the universe may go on indefinitely, or that our universe is one bubble in a sea of unknowable bubbles. There's no way we could ever know what lies beyond the boundary of physics. So, presuming there is a structure of everything that goes on infinitely, there's infinite combinations of our exact situation on Earth right now. It's also possible that every thinkable variation of this Earth has occurred or will occur. We may never have evidence to refute this possibility. So why does this reality always seem to feel like it's the worst one?
Okay. Excellent. This is like the opposite of Dr. Pangloss from Candide. For any, I guess, I don't know, Voltaire knowers listening. We could be in the worst possible future. I just feel like the mantra that I have about the Vikings, it could always get worse. I think that is like true, right? And there's a lot of people feeling a real type of way right now. And I promise you it can get worse. I super promise you it can get worse. This is definitely not the worst of all possible worlds. Certainly not the best of all possible worlds. But, were we to rank all of these infinite universes on, a spectrum, I don't know how the maths of infinity work. I'm sure a mathematician will correct me. But I would imagine that there is a middle point in this spectrum of universes. And this one is certainly below that in terms of quality. We're certainly in a bottom half universe.
It's it's not great to be in this this section of the rankings. Black Rock Sports Group asks, for the outdoor oven corner, my house has an attached garage, and like all good Midwesterners, I have a freezer in it. However, with the weather turning colder, we are reaching that time of the year where the food inside the freezer is kept warmer than the temperature outside the freezer. Since the freezer keeps the food warmer, should it be classified as an outdoor oven over the winter?
This is like a parody of like a Greek philosophy riddle. Like this is like perfectly crafted for that. I would argue no, because ovens prepare food to be eaten, and this would not do that. It just, I don't think it would do that. So no, it's not an outdoor oven, but I do like the way that you were thinking about this. I don't love that we keep on talking about garages. That's not wonderful for me.
It's an odd theme, and I feel responsible, and yet I'm going to keep going because we have a question from Tankby who asks, for Arif's home improvement corner, I have some space in my garage as I do not have a Hyundai in need of being safely stored there. And I'd like to convert it over time into a powerlifting gym. My wife is on board with that, but I'd also like to build my own sauna in it as well. She's less on board with that. Fair. What can I do to convince her to let me slowly plan for this? And how can I best go about building a sauna in this place while bearing in mind that I'm a developer and only have limited electrical and plumbing experience?
God, Jesus Christ. Okay, I think the ways to do this, there's like subtle ways and overt ways, and the subtle ways are funnier, so I want to talk about that. If there's any media in popular television that has saunas in them, suggest watching that media so that the sauna comes up, especially if the sauna is portrayed positively and not a place for like awkward interactions, and super especially if there is some benefit for the sauna existing, right? And they demonstrate the benefit, like a health benefit or a mental health benefit or whatever. So definitely like, oh yeah, we should watch whatever. And then like 3 episodes, and you're like, oh, interesting, a sauna scene. I wonder what that's about. You just keep doing that. You could like stop watching the show after the sauna scene just because you've got work to do. You got to watch some other sauna related shows. So there's that. I think also something super funny is to just accidentally leave sheafs of papers that are just studies of the health benefits of saunas. Just because I like the idea that one could accidentally leave scientific studies just all around the house about saunas. That seems fun. She'll just stumble upon them. Hopefully one of them catches her eye, that kind of thing. But yeah, you know, it's really important to develop a sauna, really important to build one. You know, I probably, you know, make it seem very serious when you're looking into the ways to build a sauna safely. Like understand like that's probably one of the concerns that she has, and so take it like very seriously, at least make it look like that, because the point is, right, the question you're asking is not can I build a good sauna or should I? The question is how do I convince? And I feel like actually taking it seriously is not an important element of this particular question, but making it look like you're taking it seriously. You know, more than just watching YouTube videos, also I'll watch YouTube videos, but like pretend to read some books on how to get better at wiring up a sauna, that kind of thing.
You know what you could do? Remember when we were kids and there were those commercials for Time Life books on like how to fix your home? And it would be like almost like an encyclopedia set. Do you remember those commercials? It was like Time Life used to have a whole mess of them. It'd be like storage and wiring and landscaping and like working with wood, like, and you'd like buy one and then you'd get like another one in like 6 weeks or whatever.
I mean, I was largely about 7 years old in the time that you're describing. So I got Zoo Books commercials.
Well, they were doing this outside of Nickelodeon, but also Nick at Night. So
okay. So I probably saw them and just didn't remember them.
That would be my suggestion, is to go out there and Maybe just start collecting these books, and maybe this will.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, maybe this will show her that you're taking it serious, that you're getting a collection of Time Life books. Maybe the library has a nice like selection of those too. You can just sit there and go over the wiring books and things.
Perfect.
Let's go to Football's Misandrous Niche, who asks, for Arif's video gaming corner, what is the most efficient way to radicalize the American populace against the tide of reaction in Madden NFL 25?
Probably Madden 25 mutual aid organizations where can you give people your Madden Ultimate players to each other? Is that I don't know. I will play Madden. I will not play Madden Ultimate Team.
I can't get involved in mutts. It's just not.
Yeah. But, if you are doing that, have like essentially a shared library among participants of Madden Ultimate Team players, and people will lend out, your gold Patrick Mahomes, maybe return a gold Myles Garrett or something like that, and just have this library that everyone can access of important resources like quarterbacks or defensive ends, that will kind of open people up to the possibility of like what community can produce, because at the end of the day, all gaming is local. And and that's where you can make the biggest impact in your local gaming scene.
There's so much wrong with what was just said.
What are you talking about?
That I'm just gonna move on and go to Don from Ohio, who asks, what should Ohio do now that we will have an overabundance of dogs and cats in our state going forward? This is my favorite election tweet, or really election question. It was going to make it regardless.
That's so funny.
That's quite good. Also, do the 2024 Detroit Lions remind you of the 1999 Rams or 2009 Saints more?
Of the two, I guess the 2009 Saints. I did rail against this perception of the Lions the last time I was asked about them, but yeah, certainly they're closer to that. Now, people on the outside looking in generally do like the Detroit Lions in the same way that they generally did like the Rams. So there is that. But people did like the Saints, like in 2009. Like it was this great story. They played like a season in Oklahoma after Katrina because of 2006, right? And so this is like they're returning to New Orleans, they're reviving the city. People are excited, and that is kind of how people feel about the Lions. Of course, the Saints were evil, and for like all of the reasons that Vikings fans are mad at them, and then also reasons that are like deeply political and that makes them more evil than actually genuinely other NFL teams. And I don't know that the Lions are that. But certainly, I think we're more on that side than we are on the plucky 1999 Rams.
I had forgotten that. Wait, did they play games in Oklahoma? I remember them playing games in Texas. I remember them playing in Houston.
Maybe I'm confusing them with the Pelicans, who I believe did play games in Oklahoma City.
Yeah, I was gonna say like the way that I remember that season anyway, or the season and a half rather after that, was that they ended up playing in San Antonio and in Houston, and then at LSU Stadium.
Oh yeah, because that's in Tulane, or that not in Tulane. Tulane's in New Orleans. That's in Baton Rouge.
Anyway, this is what. This isn't even the question you've done research on, so we'll ignore this one because we have one you've done questions, or rather you've done research on. So let's go to Deez, who asks, for Arif's Sumo Corner, I'm not even going to attempt this name. What are your expectations for Takeru Fuji. This
Sounds
basho.
like you attempted the name.
Well, I'm not going to attempt it well. How about that? This basho, after his most recent promotion to upper division. A Kachikoshi is probably a safe bet, but could he give Onosato, Kirishima, or a name here, a run for their money?
I'll admit that last name also gave me trouble. I think it's Wataka Kakage.
Great.
I think I put another
that was not going to come from me.
Cool.
I've as evidenced in the last bonus episode. Sometimes I got to take some time.
A little bit, yeah.
Putting together a name.
Okay, so Takeru Fuji is one of like the most explosive rising stars in the sport. I know the last time we talked about it, I was talking about Onosato, who is an incredible rising star, but these two have been compared to each other because of their not just their rise to the collegiate sumo ranks, but their splash onto the scene once they arrived. Takeru Fuji is the only person, or rather in 110 years, the first person to win the Emperor's Cup as a rookie. Or as like a first year highest level sumo wrestler, right? He's incredible. He does have a bunch of injury concerns, and so he's had to withdraw from tournaments because of I believe it was a tendon injury. He withdrew from a tournament, I think, for back related reasons or an ankle tendon injury, and because of that, he wasn't able to in that second or third tournament, rise up the ranks, because the way the system works is that, generally speaking, your wins minus your losses will not determine, but like as a rough guide, provide you with how many ranks up you move. And he lost a number because I think he went 2-5 before he withdrew, and which means that there were 8 absences. And so, he drops a number of ranks after having like an incredible win in the Emperor's Cup. He's a really kind of fascinating sumo wrestler, and he's largely characterized as one who relies on power and pushing, people out of the ring entirely. But he has a pretty wide range of abilities. That he's got the capacity for. He's got really good balance, of course. But he is like a mentally well-prepared fighter. And so he can win in a number of ways. Like when you get involved with like the belt and stuff like that, he can compete there. It's not like his strength as much, but he's really well-rounded. And there's like a reason that he's like won awards specifically for his technique. He's not just power. But those injury concerns are why he's significantly essentially underranked in this tournament going in. He's like ranked near the bottom. Whereas Onosato is, I think, third or second heading into the November Basho. You do have a returning Yokozuna who is top ranked, but he hasn't participated for like 16 months. It might be near the end of his career. So he's actually, my understanding is that he's not even the favorite to win the November Basho, even though he's the top ranked wrestler. So Onosato is, like I said, he's ranked second or third. He is one of the favorites to win the tournament. I don't think in this tournament, Takeru Fuji is going to be able to compete. Like he'd have to essentially go almost undefeated to get it by the end of the tournament to get to Onosato, assuming Onosato also plays well. But I think that's unlikely. Also up there, Kirishima is one of the contenders. He's highly ranked. Wakata Takakake, man, I think I screwed that up the second time. I think I was right the first time. He's coming off of a kind of a disappointing tournament, so he's a little bit lower ranked right now, so they could compete against each other, and that'll be a really good test. But I think Onosato is just like, he's too well-rounded. He is explosive, he is powerful, he's probably pound for pound one of the strongest wrestlers there, and he is really technically sound, and he's really savvy, especially for a younger wrestler. I just don't think that there's going to be an opportunity for Takeru Fuji to like get another. And mind you, they have wrestled each other before Takeru Fuji won. It's not like a complete, like it makes sense to ask this question. But I think that generally speaking, it's going to be a little bit difficult in this tournament, not just to win,
but to get to that point. But I do think that if he does compete against Kirishima, he's got a really good shot. And there's a really good chance he'll compete against Wakataka Kage. Sorry. And win against him, assuming he doesn't get, hurt, which that might continue to be a concern of his. So we'll see. But I do think that, he'll move up ranks. Like you said, Kachikoshi, safe bet. I think that that's accurate. I think he's going to move up a couple of ranks, but I don't think he's going to compete to win the tournament. I'd love to be wrong, because having this kind of rivalry, I think the Yokozuna Council called it like a tiger-dragon rivalry. Having this kind of rivalry is just great for the sport.
Aren't you glad I didn't just delete it?
I would have been so mad. That took like 10 minutes of pre-show time. Which is a lot, because I always feel pressure to pre-show because we're silent when I'm doing research, and that's awkward. So I just rush. Awful.
So close to deleting that. And then like letting it reappear like as you're looking at it. Like that's who I am today. Finally, Tracy asks for Arif's Japanese history corner.
What?
I guess the Great Tenmai famine during the Edo period, something I shouldn't be laughing about as I'm saying, was one of the deadliest famines in Japanese history. One of the popular ideas as to what caused this is the eruption of Mount Azuma. Sure. My question is, who would you have thrown into the volcano to prevent this eruption?
All right, so 1, Luke Braun. Duh, obviously. 2, cause is kind of like a difficult... So famines typically have many causes. Cause is a really difficult thing to write here, specifically because there were a number of volcanoes which probably contributed. Mount Asama certainly seems like, and there's always research being done on these questions, certainly seems like it played a big role, particularly because the volcanic ash reflected sunlight, made it difficult for crops to grow, made it colder. That obviously plays a role. But there was a volcano in Iceland that went off that drastically changed the weather patterns that may have impacted Japan. And so that also could have played a role. There was also an earlier volcano that played a role. But here's the thing. Crop failure was occurring before that volcano, primarily for the normal reasons that crop failure happens, cold weather, stuff like that. And so the reason that the volcano is attributed to that is because people still had food stores that they were going through as a product of the crop failures earlier. And then, hopefully relying later on, as the cycle goes, for a boon at some point in the near future. And that didn't occur because of the volcano. But there was already crop failure happening. But the bigger issue here is capital. I think that a lot of people always, kind of forget what role systems and governance have to play in these sorts of things. So because of the economy that Japan was developing, which is very like a mercantilist economy, which is not, when people say capitalism, they tend to think of laissez-faire, policies that encourage open trade and stuff like that. And that's not what this is. But capitalism is actually not that particular strain of capitalism necessarily. It's when capital accumulation becomes the primary economic motivation. It's when, capitalists own the means of production, et cetera. And that's what was occurring here. And they had captured the government and had defined economic policy. And the way that they had structured their economy was to kind of produce exports. That was the whole goal. And also, create a tax system that benefits the very wealthy, and they would tax rice. And so Japan turned into a monocropping agricultural society really quickly as a product of these. And rice is a notoriously volatile crop in terms of its ability to withstand stuff like cold weather. And so they just did not have the diversity of crops to handle problems like cold weather, to handle problems like volcanic ash. And they severely restricted imports, which prevented food from reaching people. So this was primarily a political problem. That said, you got to do what you can. And I think throwing Luke Braun into a volcano is like really one of your best options.
I'm glad that you did the research on it just to make sure that Luke Braun was the proper candidate.
Yeah, no, I saw that question and I instinctively had an answer, but the show, you always have to check your work. So I went and I looked at the Tenmei famine, learned a little bit more about the Tokugawa shogunate, and in doing so, concluded that, yeah, actually, Luke Braun.
Yeah, well, good. Well, that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it, unless you are Luke Braun, in which case you are apparently headed toward the volcano. Arif, what do you have to plug?
So Luke Braun wrote a piece over at Wide Left about the universe, the expansion, the limits of the universe, so kind of related to one of the questions that we just had, and the end of times, right? The end of the world. It's a piece about Justin Jefferson. I encourage you to read it. It's actually, a pretty good breakdown of like how players can impact games outside of specifically the production that they generate. So we've got that piece. Also, I am writing a piece at Wide Left about the election and how people are processing it, how a lot of people don't feel the need to process it, which I think is also interesting. My takes on the election. And, and they're always global. I try not to focus specifically on the gamesmanship of politics. I was having an argument, for example, in the politics section of our Discord. I was definitely wrong about, an element of the Democratic campaign strategy. It's not as important to me about these specific, the games that are being played, and more about kind of the larger structures of play. And so that's what's going to be, that's what I'm going to write about over at Wide Left. So we've got that. Also, obviously, game recaps. I still love my gambling piece. I still want people to read that gambling piece, so that's still up over there. But yeah, check out WideLeft.football.
Well, that's going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. If you guys have enjoyed it, we'll be back next week to discuss, hopefully, the victory over the Jaguars. But for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening, and please remember, it's 4th and 12. I think they're going to run it here, and we'll be back next week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of... and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or at my personal account at BigMono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merch. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
Hey, all things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.